much for giving us the extra 5 minutes. We appreciate it. My name is Elijah Motshekga. Even in 2022, we welcome and compliments to everyone. This is our media briefing happening first time this year. As usual, we have the Minister of Basic Education. We also have the Deputy Minister of Basic Education, as well as the Director General, but we are also joined by DDG, Ms. Simone Geyer. And we are going to start right away. Minister, I'm going to invite you to please come through to address us, and thereafter we'll deal with the other issues that are on our agenda. Thank you so much.
Good morning, and thank you, Elijah, and good morning to members of the media. Let me acknowledge my colleague, Dr. Muhaule, the DG, and senior officials in the department. So indeed, we really thank you most sincerely for allowing us this opportunity to communicate with our public on our readiness for the year of 2022. Tomorrow, we'll be receiving learners from inland provinces. In the past 2 years, we had a common day for reopening, but after consulting extensively, because the calendar is being consulted on 2 years ahead, we got from communities and for parents that they will prefer a different dates for the opening for inland and different dates for the reopening. So tomorrow we'll be receiving learners from the Free State, from Gauteng, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and Northwest, the 5 provinces. And then next week we'll be receiving the coastal provinces, which is Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Northern Cape, and Western Cape. They're all going back next week. So today we thought we should just give you a general whole school readiness presentation, which will be covered by DDG Geyer, just to give you a sense of the different elements that we start working on from July as we prepare for the next year, to say how far are we with the different parts of our readiness, ranging from the delivery of books, admissions, everything that we do that would enable us to be ready for the next year. So DD Geyer will be able to provide that information, the information which we have already shared with our portfolio committee. But also, I think we will note that we continue again in 2022 with the COVID albatross still on our necks, which has very devastating impacts on basic education in the past 2 years. We have spoken extensively about the learning losses that we've incurred as a direct result of COVID-19, the loss of teaching and learning time. Our own monitoring and evaluation teams have done very systematic assessments to say how much time we've lost and what are the impacts of the losses that we've encountered. Our partners like the NECT, the National Education Collaboration Trust, also have given us reports of their assessments about losses in terms of learning time. As a sector, we've sought out different strategies to keep the sector going, even under very difficult conditions, working together with our stakeholders, and we have been able to return all learners back to school. And not all learners, some learners back to school, almost 80% thereof. So in 2021, we recorded a significant decline in the number of schools that were closed. If you recall that in 2020, where they stop and go, but in 2021, we were quite lucky that our system had gotten used to how to manage COVID-19 protocols, so we had little disruptions. But we also believe that also the high vaccination rates that we had in the sector have allowed us some element of stability. And we wish to applaud all our schools for doing all they could to ensure that the protocols are observed. And we expect the same also this year, to make sure that we keep tight to the protocols and limit any disruptions that will come because of schools closing and opening because of infections in schools. The biggest part of our report, which will also come from DDG Gates, about admissions. And we have to say upfront, we have been able to place the majority of our learners, but provinces like Gauteng, partly Western Cape, and some areas in KZN, in your urban areas like in Durban, we are still dealing with some problems, but provinces have assured us that they're doing everything in their power. That's why we want our parents to allow provinces to identify possible places to place other learners. I know it's not very comfortable for learners, for parents to know that when Tuesday other learners are going to schools, their children are not going to school. But we are committing that by law we are compelled to find spaces for every child. So it's not their burden alone, it's our responsibility also to make sure that we find places for all the learners, and really appeal with communities to allow provinces to place learners where the places, because there are also understandably preferences that parents have, and sometimes those preferences are every parent's preference, and therefore we are not able to use all those spaces for what the parents wish. Because we are aware that there are also schools that have reached their maximum capacities, and further admissions are impossible at those schools. Again, you recall that last year the department, we did announce that there are going to be vaccinations. The Department of Health, not us, announced that vaccinations are available for young people aged 12 years and above. And we could not, because the announcement came by the time we're busy with exams, and we couldn't stem up or put up a very strong vaccination program. And now, working with our SGBs, with our parents, with the Department of Health, we will intensify the program to encourage young people to vaccinate, and also encourage parents to get their kids vaccinated. Did you have had lots of reports of parents saying they now hear that we're going to vaccinate their children without their permission, which is a bit uncomfortable. And I did explain that we'll seek at all costs to make sure that we work with them, we get their permission. But vaccination programs are run by the Department of Health, not ourselves. So if 12-year-olds go and present themselves at a health facility for vaccination, it's completely out of our control. But our preference will that parents will work with us to motivate and support learners and their children to vaccinate. So for education personnel, vaccination sites are still open. We're encouraging them also now to go for the booster that we're told is available. And we need to clarify that we're not vaccinating in schools as yet, because the Department of Health does not have the capacity to be in schools, and ourselves had not put mechanisms to have vaccination programs in schools. It's a program we're going to work on with MECs, with our SGBs, to make sure that if there are vaccinations in schools, there are certain protocols that we follow. But as I've just indicated, if a 12, 15-year-old goes and presents themselves to a vaccination site, it's a matter between, I think, the health department and those learners, though we will wish parents to involve themselves in that. In December the 30th of last year, we did issue directives amending the regulations in terms of the Disaster Management Act in order to address the matter relating to gatherings, and amendments has also been affected in the directions in schools. And the amendment with this regard is around spectators, permitting spectators at sport venues. Because again, parents were quite at pains that when there are sporting activities, they drop their kids, they can't really be spectators, or only one parent is allowed. So again, we've had to look at that to allow parents to be part of their children's development, growth, and also be able to be spectators in the sporting activities which are permissible. So we have issued amendments with regards to that. And with regards to schooling, for this month until the next announcement, we're saying schools will remain the same, especially on the rotational timetable, where is applicable when schooling concluded in 2021. The fact of the matter is that COVID-19 is still very much with us, and we need to continue to work together to fight it. We're exploring possibilities to return schooling to normal, as the call has been made by teacher unions, some teacher unions, parents and even schools that they would wish to have all their learners coming, but unfortunately we have to comply ourselves, the Department of Education, with the protocols of COVID-19. We can't do it on our own, and we have to really work at our own mechanisms. Next week we'll be releasing our 2021 results, so I'm sure we can keep the track at bay. We will announce how many learners are there. We will explain how many wrote. But we thought we should take this opportunity to enlighten our people around what are the pass rates, because there's a popular narrative about the 30% pass, and sometimes it's not very productive to say, no, it's not 30%, but maybe we've not enlightened the people adequately about what are the pass rate requirements. I was at another meeting when people my age were talking about 30%. I said, go and look at your certificate. Don't you have a standard grade somewhere there? Even in your A's, you might have had 6 A's, but somewhere maybe in Africans, you got 30% and you have your bachelor and you're a doctor today. So it's the same drama. So maybe even better than the drama that we could have gone to a medical school to the 30% in Africans maybe, and passed all other subjects with A's. So I want to repeat this. To get a bachelor, which allows you to go to university, you must obtain at least 40% in home language. So I'm Tswana, I did Sotho. I can't be expected to really have perfect Sotho. It's not even my home language. So if I get 40, which means I can adequately communicate in an African language. And you're saying that's the minimum you can get, and it's compulsory in a home language. And as I say, most of us are not even doing home language, which are our home languages. We are doing the language which is available at school, but we are saying you must get compulsory 40%. You must obtain at least 50% in 4 other subjects. Not 30%, 50%. And you must obtain at least 30% for a language of learning of that higher education, which is, it could be Afrikaans and any other language. So of the 6 subjects, you must pass 6 of the 7 subjects. So it's like you go to a medical school with 6 A's and 1 30%. So there's no 30% pass. It's that subject that you got a 30%. The 60 could be A's. To get a diploma, which is not necessarily your bachelor, you must obtain 40% again of your home language. You could be Xhosa, home language, writing Zulu. It's not your home language, but then we say compulsory must get 40%. And you must obtain at least 40% in 3 other subjects. And you can obtain 30% in the language of learning. So you must pass 6 of the 7 subjects. The higher certificate, you must obtain at least 40% again in your home language. Again, you could be doing Zulu being Tsonga, but we say give us 40%. You must obtain at least 30% in the language of learning like all other. And you must obtain at least 40% in 2 other subjects and obtain then the 30% in the other subject. But you must pass 6 out of the 7 subjects. So I thought we should raise that, but we'll continue to communicate so that the narrative of the 30%, we have to disabuse ourselves of that, because it's not an accurate presentation to say you can go to university at 30%. So when people fail at university, they say how they have to fail, they came with 30%. You can't go with 30% to university, right? So we have to deal with the other factors. So I think we will continue to educate people on that. Yesterday, I was in Mpumalanga on our old program, which we call the Second Chance Matric program. And this program, we really want the media to also help us popularize it, because we are closing the registration on the 15th of February. And I think we're now 5 years into the Second Chance program. And it's meant to assist young people who didn't complete their matric or who want to improve their matric results to be able to do other careers. And this program came as a result of what the request came from President Zuma, was saying every time he meets young people who say, you know, President, I left school, I think I had difficulties, I felt pregnant, I was not ready at the time, but now I want to really get my matric. And he said, can't we give young people a chance to come back to school? And I said, President, we can't get them to come back to school. We can work with them and develop a program which enables them to write their matric. And we've had very good results also of young people. Indeed, some are working, some are in different careers. They want to improve. Others want to go back to universities. We have set for this program. So we started opening for this round in August last year. We're closing on the 15th of February. The first group will write in June. The next group will write in December. You can write even 2 subjects a year. You can write 2 in June, 2 in December. You already have 4 in your pocket. Or you can write 1 and write 1 in June, 1 December, 1 in June. So in 3 years' time, you'll have your matric. We have, and because I don't want to take too much time on it, we have a section in our website which is called Second Matric Program. Will tell you what services, what support we have, where do we register, and how to go around it. But again, one of the major areas of concerns from our committees, which has been brought to us regularly, it was about the learner well-being issues of safety, issues of bullying, issues of substance abuse in terms of violence. And again, we, as part of our readiness, we've put a number of measures in place to make sure that indeed we can continue to support our children. We have put in place, for instance, we've finalized our protocols on the elimination of discriminations in schools, in addition to the protocols to deal with incidents of corporal punishment. We've also put in place protocols of management and reporting of sexual abuse in schools and harassment. We've also improved our programs around we have gazetted the policy for the prevention and management of learner pregnancy in our schools. Through this policy, we want to continue engaging with other sectors and parents to strengthen the prevention of early and unintended pregnancy. I've had a discussion, for instance, this December with the Minister of Health to see if we can work together to have youth-friendly clinics, so that if a young girl, 16, 17, feels the hormones are disturbing them, they can go to the health to say, hey, there's somebody who say we must turn the corner. How do you help me? So they can discuss and educate them if they feel they can't engage with parents. So I look at all different measures as to how we can work with young people to have youth-friendly services, both mental and psychological, so that we can deal with children who get depression, sometimes send them into drugs, and they're unable to go back to drugs. So we're putting a comprehensive program with our sectors, because indeed, committees rightfully have really raised issues about learner well-being. But we are also, despite the problems of COVID-19, looking at sports, arts, and culture, because we know that those are some of the activities which help young people and help us to keep young people away from unintended behaviors. We would also, I think, with time, report on the progress that we have done in the overhaul of the history curriculum from grade 4 to 12, because there's been a huge outcome also about the history of South Africa, what we've been teaching our children, which is not helping them to understand who they are, and also helping them to understand their place in the continent, their place in the world, but also their relationships and their place in the country. So there are broader consultations which are happening with relevant stakeholders. We're going to conclude them this year, and it will be followed by submission of the draft revised history curriculum to Umalusi for evaluation and appraisals. And I'm really appealing to historians or people who have an interest in history, in archaeology, and all sorts of material that will help us to capture quite correctly our history, to participate in these consultations that we have undertaken, just to make sure people don't ask us, now where do we get this one? We were left out. We're going to go out in a major participation. I must thank South African business in particular. We've had, I think because of the problems that we have really encountered during COVID, our big business has come to the party. We have, and I really feel reluctant to mention others, but some have really come big way. MTN has developed an iSchool for us, a platform that we've worked together, because with COVID we need to be able to reach as many learners as possible. And the difficulty is that the classrooms, which are very disrupted, have become inadequate for us to enable us to do our work the way we're supposed to be doing. And COVID has given us that advantage. We've had companies like AppBob, we've been really donating full schools to us. For instance, Toyota South Africa gave us more than 239 engines for our schools, for our third curriculum stream. We have, as I say, I'm reluctant, there's Usupol also, who's donated a number of sanitation programs for us, but other programs, different mining companies have been very helpful. I mean, I was in Bapalaboro last week, DM, and went with the mining companies there to see the infrastructure that they are putting for us in terms of supporting us on our sanitation programs, complementing some of our priorities. And for that, we're extremely grateful. We have your Nestle, Unilever, Tiger Brands, Colgate, Palmolive, and other companies coming to the fore to assist us, because we've been under, I think, a very difficult position in the past few years, last year and this year. On school infrastructure, again, I thought we should use this to enlighten people, DM, about, because there are also concerns that since we're giving the 3,228 schools, we've not moved on it, which is inaccurate, but maybe because we've not been able to communicate to people to say, yes, there is progress. The Deputy Minister on a fortnightly level meets with the infrastructure team, and out of the 3,228 schools, we have completed, for instance, for water projects, we've given 1,156 schools, we've provided electricity to 373 schools, and we have built new schools, 286 schools in the past year. But on SAFE, which is a presidential program, which is sanitation, safe sanitations for schools, to replace pit latrines, we have already provided 1,439 schools. We have 1,423 schools which are still under construction. We are left with about 800 schools which we still have to finish in this year. So of the 3,000, 1,000 has received full programs. The last group, they are at very advanced stages of delivery, and we're going to finish the last lot now. And the delivery depends on the money we have. We can't build 3,000 schools when we don't have money for 3,000 schools in a year. We plan according to the budget, but can assure the public that indeed there's lots of work happening. We're still the DG, in addition to paper reports that we get from provinces and our service providers, has been visiting provinces to make sure that we compare what we are reported, what we are told, and what we see. Same thing when DM goes home to Mpumalanga, he passes a few schools to check indeed that the reports that he gets weekly are the reports that are there. As I said, I'd gone to ANC program, and I just felt that I just can't drive all the way to Palaboro and not pass the schools on the way and say, I know we have a project here, let me see what the program is. So there is also updated information, but I just wanted to allay the fears that indeed we are making progress. I had thought also we'll be able to respond to the question of dropout rates that come from the COVID-19 pandemic, but maybe DM will enlighten the DG, because there are also miscommunications and misinformations, because researchers say this, and without being arrogant, I say people who mark registers are us. We mark all registers every day. So they are sent to us. So we should be the most reliable body to tell you how many learners we have in the system, how many learners we don't have in the system, how many learners we've lost in the system. So any other research is going to be either your random sampling or it's going to be whatever. We don't random sample. We count all learners. Within the next 10 days, we'll tell you how many learners are in our schools in 2022, how many were there in 2021, and compare them properly and indicate that the grade 12s or the grade 2s that we have retained them as they are, or we can account for 1%. We can even show you from our statistics that indeed from grade 10, when others go to FET colleges and others indeed drop out for different reasons, which we investigate, truancy, teenage pregnancy, curriculum challenges, this is the percentage that we're losing. So that we're able to give you accurate information about retention rates and repetition rates and dropout rates, because repetition doesn't mean that your children have dropped out. They've not passed the grade, right? So I think I'll ask DG to clarify that, because there were also lots of concerns about the retention rates in the system. And I think rightfully we owe you an explanation to clarify what the situation is. But Elijah, can I just ask DG, because the main aim of the briefing is to take us through our readiness for 2022, and I hope the other matters will report on as we find the opportunities. But thank you very much for the time, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, everyone in the house, and good morning to all the viewers in the country. As Minister has indicated, this is a presentation that talks to school readiness, and in particular school readiness for 2022. The process of school readiness does not start in 2022, it starts in the preceding year, and in particular in the month of November. There is a lot of work and monitoring and checking of readiness around various areas that constitutes school readiness. And so this presentation will then look at that, and we'll try and cover those areas in as far as we can. It's quite a detailed report, but I will speak to it, and I will try and elaborate on some of the areas that Minister has highlighted, but also go into more detail on some of the specific areas that constitutes school readiness. So there are various approaches that we take when we monitor school readiness, and in particular we have a database called the South African Schools Administration and Management System, commonly referred to in the acronym SA-SAMS, and that is a very important system on a database that we look at from the schools. It is tracked right at each school, and we look at learner attendance on a regular basis from there, and that gives us a holistic picture of what is actually happening around learner attendance in the country. We also, in the month of November, as I've indicated, we then look at school readiness monitoring and what the preparations are in the previous year in preparation for the new academic year. On a regular basis, and these in the time of COVID in particular, and in the time that we have utilized virtual meetings very oftenly, we were able to do that a lot more favorably and a lot more regularly. So we meet with the provinces on a monthly basis on the details of readiness, on the details of curriculum delivery, and looking at the compliance for COVID protocols. And these are called DG's engagements because it's led by our DG. And we meet with the heads of the provinces, and we meet with the heads of the districts, as well as all the support staff that constitute a district as well as in the province, to feed in information to us on various key themes that we ask questions on, that we compile reports on, and that we analyze in terms of determining readiness, in terms of curriculum implementation, in terms of various aspects that we need to track during the year to ensure that there is success in the delivery of the curriculum, but also in the readiness then that takes us into the following year. Then what we have on top of that is an independent monitoring of school readiness in particular, but also during the COVID times it helped us in terms of looking at readiness for the schools to reopen, and what protocols were in place and what the problems were, if any, within the provinces. And this is done by the NECT, the National Education Collaboration Trust, who is our partner, and they have independently then gone out through an independent appointed service provider to check and verify the provincial reports and to determine the extent to which those reports match the reports that we get from the provinces. On the areas of monitoring, which we do in the month of November in detail to check the 2022 readiness, we cover areas that look at COVID-19 protocols. I've indicated the SASAMs and the importance of that information. We look at school admissions, we look at the provisioning of teachers, we look at the provisioning of learner and teacher support materials that need to be provided to the schools. We look at the curriculum management and the readiness of that for the following year. We look at ICT related matters in particular because we are introducing coding and robotics as a subject. We also look at that, but more importantly, under the COVID period, we have to look at the extent to which in ICT there is availability of materials and use of alternative measures in the case where normal schooling cannot continue as we had envisaged. We also look at the National School Nutrition Program, because we run that in many schools, and there is a lot of work and readiness that needs to happen to ensure that the feeding can happen from day one that the schools reopen. We also then have to ensure from an infrastructure point of view, as Minister had indicated, we have to look at the provision of infrastructure and to emphasize the extent to which there's safe water, there's sanitation, and there's learner transport that is provided in the areas that needs to happen. And so we look at the readiness in the month of November to ensure that sufficient work has been done in these areas, and where there have been some circumstances that made it difficult, for instance, if there was some storm damage, or if, as we will now pick up in the month of January, there is an influx of learners in a particular area which requires maybe mobile units to be put up. All of this is tightly managed by a team of people at the national level, but also at the provincial level, to track the readiness in the year as we close for the following year, but also then as we pick up these problems that may emerge as the schools reopen. We also look at school safety, because that is a critical enabler to ensure that normal schooling can be provided in a safe environment. And we look at social cohesion and equity, and to ensure that the learner wellness and their well-being is attended to within the schools. So there's a program that we give details on, as well as the school sport and enrichment programs, which during the time of COVID was very difficult for us to implement, but we have looked at the creative ways and means to try and have a semblance of normality around that as well. So I'll just get into lifting up the details around these themes that I have indicated. The key thing around the COVID-19 protocols, we have put in place extensive protocols that are still relevant in the school. We have standard operating procedures. There are set measures which have to be in place within all the schools. We track and monitor that, and we have closed the year to ensure that all of that is in place, and that the schools are ready in terms of the COVID protocols that are enlisted in our standard operating procedures, and that they will be able to then ensure that these protocols are adhered to when the schools reopen. Minister has already spoken to the area of the vaccinations. So the vaccinations are conducted by the Department of Health, as Minister has indicated. The vaccination program that the Department of Health does is for learners between the age of 12 and 17 years. They have not started vaccinating anyone under 12 years old. Also, Minister has highlighted that vaccinations are not conducted within the schooling environment. It is the Department of Health that manages that. And where the learners are having the vaccinations, the parent involvement and the parent consent is a personal matter between a parent and a child, and so it's managed in that way, and the Department of Health oversees the whole process. There is an integrated school health program policy that is in place that the Department of Health looks at, and they follow those protocols there to ensure that if any vaccination happens and it's off-site, that there are the protocols in terms of what parents have to fill out, whether they need to give consent or not, depending on where the vaccination site is. But these sites are not located within the schools. The Ministerial Advisory Committee has given us recommendations, and those recommendations in terms of how we have to conduct the opening of schools are still relevant. The advice that they have given us in terms of last year, which was in July, the 22nd of July 2021, is the script and the letter that we follow, because they have not changed that. And in that, they have allowed us to open the primary schools to full capacity, and where they are able to, as primary schools function within full capacity, they are allowed then to ensure that they maintain a feasible physical distance, that the primary school learners take regular breaks in terms of having a mask break, and that this happens within the intervals of a timetable within the school, that 5-10 minute mask break is given to allow for learners just to take off the masks and to take fresh air outside. And that's within the Ministerial Advisory Committee's advice that they've given us. In the case of high schools, they did not allow us to open up the high schools because there are larger numbers within high schools, and the high schools were not able to, in many instances, maintain that 1 meter apart arrangement within the classroom. Also, the nature of what happens within a high school is that in some subjects you may have smaller numbers, but when you come together as a big group, like in the languages, there are certain subjects where you come together, whether it's maths literacy, or whether it is in the language, whether you're doing first language or first additional language. Those numbers then would not, in those instances, be able to accommodate the physical distancing for how our schools were built. Our classrooms were not built to accommodate physical distance of 1.5 meters, even although we were allowed to relax the 1.5 to 1 meter. It still is very difficult when you have a big class, and so that's why the high schools did not follow, not all high schools in public schools followed, where you have a school that was able to accommodate for that arrangement, and there are such schools in public schooling that were able to accommodate all the needs that were required in terms of the COVID protocols. They were allowed to request permission from the provincial departments, and that permission, after checking all the validity of meeting the requirements, was then granted to the learners, to the school, to allow the learners in those high schools. But it's not all of the high schools, so we have a hybrid model currently. There are schools that then follow rotational learning, and that is allowing the learners to come on some days to school, and that on the days they don't come to school, they have a clear program that they are working through. And when they come back, there is some way in which teachers then check to see the extent to which they have covered that. It's very difficult, and we've had to put a lot of support measures in place together with this rotational learning, where we were not able to run the normal classes. But in as far as we could, we have gone extensively in the support programs, which we will talk to a bit later. On admissions, learner admissions, Minister did speak to that. So admissions opens up in different times depending on the province, and also depending on how big the province is. So we have approximately 13 million learners in the country, and depending on how big, so there are some big provinces that have the dominant numbers, like KZN, Limpopo, Eastern Cape, Gauteng, to some extent Western Cape has also got some large numbers, and then we have more rural based provinces. So for instance, where a province is very big, they will open up earlier, like the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. They open up as early as April for admissions. Gauteng has a very set way. They are very intense in the way in which they do their admissions, and so they have a first phase. which was in August and closed in September. It's a month that they open up, and they do online admissions, but you are also allowed to go to the schools and go and register there. They try and encourage the online as far as possible. And then they had a second phase which ran from September to October. And they are still busy cleaning up, because there's a large demand in Gauteng based on the influx of workers who come into Gauteng to come and work, and who bring their children along with. Also, Gauteng is faced with a lot of foreign nationals' children who come into the schooling system, and so all of these learners have to be accommodated, and there is a clean-up process that's happening now. KZN, like I've indicated, they've also opened up early in April, and Limpopo has also done that. Northern Cape is a much smaller province, so they had a shorter period of opening up in July to November, but they're very diverse and vast, and so they also have to manage their admissions. On the actual placement of the learners, Minister has indicated that it's under 10%, but it's actually less than that. So I've indicated we've got about 13 million learners in the country, and currently, based on the big provinces that still need to place, there are under 400,000 learners, which is much lower than the Minister had indicated on the 10%. We've got a breakdown on the figures. If there was a monitor to show that, we could have flighted that slide, just to give you the breakdown of the numbers. The provinces have really, in the preparation for admissions, gone out of their way to try and get the message across, to ensure that all parents everyone understands that you need to register your child, especially if it's in the key intake years, like in grade 1 and in grade 8. But notwithstanding that, there are still some difficulties that the system does experience due to late applications, and this is the main reason why we struggle with placement, especially in the high urban areas. Some of the reasons why we have these difficulties and challenges is because parents sometimes ignore, or they are unable to meet the time frame that is given when you open up for admissions. Either they are working in Gauteng and the learner needs to be registered in Eastern Cape, in the village where they come from, and it's physically difficult for them to do that, and they may not have anyone who can assist them, and so they delay in the registration of their children. Also, we have, like I've explained, the problem of influx, that at the beginning of the year, parents bring their children from the village to come to cities and to live with them and to attend school, where they are able to then look after their children. Informal settlements also spring up around various communities, and that allows then brings an influx from rural to urban, and it presents the challenges that we are talking about. There's also problems around a perception that English medium schools are better quality schools, and so parents want to put their learners into English medium classes, and where that is not offered in the area where they live, it becomes a bit difficult for that placement, and so the province has to then look at the nearest area where they can place learners around English medium schools. There are insufficient schools in urban areas as a result of just the difficulty in planning for the demand of spaces. We are unable to accurately plan what the influx will be of learners, because we don't know how many parents. There's no way in which parents tell us before the time that I'm planning to bring my child to Gauteng or to Western Cape or KZN, from within KZN even, from the village to an urban area. Also, the issue around how people get work is not always that has an impact on what happens around schooling and planning for readiness of the learners to come. There are also issues around in urban areas. Parents have particular choices of schools that they want to send their learners to, and when they're not able to get their learners into the school that they wish, they often don't give a second choice or a third choice that the province can consider, and so a school has a capacity of a certain number of spaces, and where they cannot accommodate that, that's when the learner has to, we have to liaise together with the parent to agree on what would be the next best option of a school that the learner can be placed in. On teacher provisioning then, this is also something that happens, it precedes the year of the actual school academic year. So post-provisioning, schools get a staff establishment. They have to declare the staff establishment in provinces by the 30th of September of each year, to allow that in the month of October the school can receive its formal establishment letter, which determines, based on the number of learners that they have at the school, this will be the number of teachers that they qualify for. It's called a post-establishment. And then from that process, schools would then be able to make the final planning around what would happen for the following year. That post-establishment, if the school has lost learner numbers, they would qualify depending on how many learners they have lost in the previous year. They would qualify for less teachers, which means that some of the teachers at the school would be additional to the staff establishment, and would have to be moved to an area where there is a need for that teacher in the neighboring area. So in migration of learners, parents often make decisions based on a performance of a school maybe, or based on the personal needs of where they move from one area to another. And so learners move in that way, and as a result of that, there's that knock-on effect that may affect the establishment of the school. Also from rural to urban, if all the learners start moving from rural areas into urban areas, it has a knock-on effect that staff establishments get affected in rural areas as well. And so we then have to manage that with the provinces to ensure that the teachers are moved into the area of need where we require these teachers, and that happens in the year preceding, so that by the time the school closes in December, we would have sorted that out. There are also some unintended consequences around provisioning, which is some of it you can plan for. So we can plan for retirement, because we can see long before the time when teachers are going to retire, and we have an aging cohort, so we have a very clear understanding of what those needs are. But COVID and what has happened with either teachers becoming incapacitated with long COVID, or that they have high levels of comorbidities, or that they have passed away, has impacted on what we do with provisioning. And so therefore these have to be addressed. And the way in which we then do that is through looking at where we get our supply for educators. So our supply it has we have different approaches in where we get a supply, but we have a state responsibility, and we have a state-funded bursary called the Funza Lushaka bursary, and each year there are graduates who come out. For this year, if all of those figures that we have pass the academic year last year, we would have about 6,000 teachers that come out of universities, and they would be placed. We have their profiles, and we place them working with the provinces, and we try in as far as possible to place them as soon as we get the results. But we also have a supply of teachers that come out through those learners who have had bursaries offered by NSFAS, and we also place those. But there are also those who are self-funded, whose parents or some sponsor has funded their studies, and we also place those. And so we keep a database of all these different categories, and we, based on the profile and the need, depending on what the system is showing us, in some instances, if there's a high demand for a particular kind of teacher, like a math teacher is still a scarce a subject, or a science teacher, so these teachers get snapped up very quickly. Also the languages, sometimes particular languages, there's a high demand, and we place these learners faster. And in other instances we find placements a bit later. But roughly from our database, we are by June we have placed all the prospective teachers from the database are all snapped up already. Then on the learner teacher support material, the LTSM, we just have some information. So we have catalogs, and schools order and provinces order from these catalogs for the various grades. In terms of preparing for a supply of LTSM, it's not 100% of ordering from the catalog, because you will know from how you remember when you were at school, we got our books in January, but we had to return the books at the end of the year. Some of us might not have been such model students, and we lost the books, and so that influences the percentage that is retrieved. But largely speaking, provinces are able to retrieve the books in a high percentage, and so it's just a top-up that they have to order on additional books, which they do on an annual basis. There are different procurement models that provinces follow. So there are orders for textbooks, which is the top-up model that we talk about, but then there's also stationery that is provided, and then there's a pack of stationery that our schools receive from us. So the orders that happen for the procurement of stationery, in particular, we favor the quintile 1 to 3 schools to ensure that they get the books long before the time. And on the procurement for textbooks, there are two models that are followed, and provinces have the right to choose which is the best that works for them on economies of scale. So some provinces may choose a centrally procured model, and they order then for all the schools, irrespective of whether they are Section 20 or Section 21 schools. In some instances, provinces have given the schools that are categorized as Section 21, they allow them to do the ordering themselves, and they only order for Section 20 schools. And so we have the details of each and every province and what the model is that they follow. We meet with them regularly throughout the year, but in particular from roughly about June to November, we track the progress of these orders and the extent to which they have delivered and the readiness of it. On curriculum management, I've indicated that especially during the COVID times, we've had to look at more innovative ways in terms of how we can support learners, how we can provide resources, content resources to our learners. And we have state-owned digital content resources that we share with our learners. We have 1,100 titles of state-owned content, which is not only about state-owned textbooks for high enrollment subjects. It's also the workbooks that we print from grade R to grade 9, as well as we have graded readers and big books, and we have some other support material as well, which our partners have assisted us with to provide additional free online content that is available from the DBE website in learner support packages, and this information is available. We publicize and we provide the links. Like I say, if we had a monitor that could reflect these slides, we would be in a position to flight that as well, to give these websites that you can access. And it provides the kind of support each year to learners. We have a DBE cloud that has got a very user-friendly way of navigating to gain information, irrespective of whether you are a parent or a learner or a teacher. This information is provided for you, and you can get a lot of what I'm talking about now in terms of support programs from there. The provinces also have their own websites and platforms, and they also put all the information from the provinces up there. And like I've indicated, in terms of the ICT, we've also got some private resource portals that the network operators have assisted us with, and in particular they are looking towards how they can support us digitally on these platforms. We have a number of zero-rated educational websites as well that we have put on our website, and that provinces have put on their websites, and that is very easy for learners to get. Then on the coding and robotics, just to indicate that this is an area that we recognize is more and more of a demand, and that we need to prepare our learners for entering a world that is more digitally managed. And so for that reason, we have an advanced curriculum that is in the process of being approved by Umalusi, and we are piloting this curriculum in grades R to 9, So we've started already with the training and of the teachers, but from 2022 onward we'll be focusing on grade 4 to 6 and grade 8 in a pilot. In 23 we'll be looking at grade 9, and in 24 we look at grade R to 9 in terms of how this curriculum will unfold. On the school nutrition program, I've already indicated that we have a program that requires planning in advance, and these funds are transferred to schools in a decentralized procurement model to ensure that they provide for the delivery of food and fuel, and to ensure that there is sufficient supplies in stock in the year preceding, and that the volunteer food handlers are available and they have been trained and understand the COVID protocols that need to be in place to provide the meals, and they prepare the meals on a daily basis. And from the national and the provincial side, there is a committee that looks at the operational compliance as well as the functionality in respect, and monitor in respect of the nutrition program that we run at the school. On the side of infrastructure, I've indicated as well that there's a lot of work that has to go into ensuring that there's sufficient preparation for the reopening of schools, to ensure that we meet the demands of classroom shortage, what the infrastructure hotspots are that provinces have identified where there's an influx of learners, and how to provide temporary accommodation where we are not able to physically build those schools. The best option is to have a brick and mortar building, but that cannot happen immediately, and so then we have the mobile classrooms. There's also maintenance of the school buildings, and to ensure that that has occurred where it was within the plan, and where there are unintended areas that have been identified in terms of maintenance, they see how best to expedite that, and we do follow maintenance guidelines in relation to that. So it's not that every school can just submit. There's a guideline of how you have to follow for the approval, and that we have to ensure that this maintenance happens timelessly. So the breakdown then, in summary, is around just looking at the key problems at the beginning of the year, which is around school furniture. So if you have an influx of learners, one of the key problems would be availability of sufficient furniture, and schools now, when they reopen, would have to submit all that information, and in as far as we could close the year in picking up those difficulties, we have looked at that, and we have already supplied school furniture, but where the influx happens, we then have to look at what the shortfall is and how best to address that. There's also furniture that needs to be repaired and rehabilitated, and so we have arrangements with correctional services and the Department of Labour around this, to ensure that we can recondition and rehabilitate furniture that is still able to do that. And then there are some specifications around the school furniture, of course, that we need to follow, and that needs to be approved by the South African Bureau of Standards, and so we monitor that that compliance happens as well, and there are task teams and interprovincial task teams that follow that. On learner transport, there is quite extensive planning that needs to happen for learners that require learner transport, in particular if they have to travel long distances across from a more rural area. In some instances there is no high school, and they have to travel to where the nearest high school is. Alternatively, where there are difficulties around special schools, there is a need to ensure that these learners are transported safely. And for that to happen, we have an arrangement and an agreement with the Department of Transport, and also that we have to ensure then and monitor that those service providers that the Department of Transport has appointed to assist us in transporting the learners, they follow the road safety programs and they follow the COVID protocols, so that these learners are transported safely, and that they comply with safety and law enforcement rules. And so we also have then tracked the numbers of learners per province that require the transport, and the extent to which the transport is provided, and that they have complied with all the needs that I've just identified now around this. We have a breakdown. Again, we are able to project the slide if there was an opportunity for that, or to provide that information. Then we have some standards that we need to ensure around the transport outcomes for the learners, and the most important is to ensure timely delivery of services. If the learners don't arrive on time, they will be late for school, they will miss out on key lessons that start. To also ensure that the rate of road accidents are reduced, and to achieve this, we have a coordinated approach of planning and implementation together with the Department of Transport, but also with the service providers, to ensure that the learners then arrive on time, and that they adhere to the traffic regulations, and that the vehicles that the learners are transported in, or the bus, in the case of using a bus, that those vehicles are technically safe, and that the vehicle maintenance plan is maintained. And all of this we then monitor and track, like I said, together with the Department of Transport. On learner safety, on school safety, so we have to ensure that the school adheres to the Occupational Health and Safety Act in terms of what happens in the school, that the provisions as stipulated in the Act in terms of having first aid toolkits, and that they are, have all the requirements in the toolkit, that there's training involved of the teachers around the drug testing, especially in some of the social problems that plague our schools. So we monitor all of that. There's also areas around positive discipline that we train the teachers on, and that we try to inculcate a human rights-based culture in the learning environments, to ensure that from a school safety point of view, everything is in order. There is a lot of work that we are doing, and in particular, Minister and Deputy Minister have conducted road shows around violence in schools, gender-based violence, as well as bullying, and a prevention program to ensure that we mold our learners to be noble and respectful citizens with high values and high esteem, and that there's a consciousness of the environment. On social cohesion, I've indicated that the COVID has affected that. We try in as far as possible to ensure that we are still able to conduct these programs. We used to have a national schools moot court. We had the oral history program, youth citizen action program, democracy in education program, choir, and so on. But in the COVID period, it was a bit difficult to conduct that. So what we are trying to do now is to see how best we can try and accommodate for some stimulation of learners still in these areas on a face-to-face and online activity, and this will continue during the 2022. And then lastly, on the sports program as well, that has an effect when the infection rates are high, and then we are not able to conduct a sport enrichment program in the way in which a school program normally goes. But as and when the infection rates are lowered, we reintroduce that as well, and we monitor that depending on the area and what the circumstances are around infection rates per area. We have a risk-adjusted strategy which we embark on throughout the year, and we then advise based on that and what the circumstances per area is about the safety of whether you can conduct those programs. Thank you very much. That's the end of the presentation.
Good morning, Minister, Deputy Minister, colleagues from the department and colleagues from the different media houses. Compliments of the new season. The Minister has requested that I should address the issue of the dropout rate. I want to profusely apologize for the report on school readiness. It's a very comprehensive report, and I've requested Mr. Elijah Motshekga to circulate the detailed PowerPoint presentation for you to be able to go through it. Well, there is a projected 700,000 number of learners who might have dropped out of the system as a result of COVID-19. And I must just indicate that this is a projected number, and I think it's between 150,000 and 700,000. You would have heard about this from Dr. Nick Spall, from our own researchers in the department, Dr. Martin Gustafsson, Nompumelelo, and others. But let me also indicate that from the Education Management Information System, which is the system that we use in the department to collate data from each and every school, which is what the minister referred to earlier on, the registers, you know, being marked every day and collecting this information from schools. The EMIS indicates that the learner enrollment has increased from 2020, which was 13.1 million in 2020, and has now increased to 13.4 million in 2021, which means that the enrollment has increased by 300,000 learners in 2021. Just to, in a way, triangulate what the EMIS is saying, the number of full-time candidates who registered and enrolled for the class of 2021 increased, I'm sure you know by now, from 610,000 to 484 in 2020. And then this went to 733,746 in 2021, which means we have 123,262 more candidates compared to 2020. Our numbers in 2022, looking at what comes from the grade 11s of 2021, are likely to even be more than this. And there are many reasons for this, one of which is, of course, the fact that our assessment policy has changed. Instead of relying on 75% on exams, exams now accounts for 40%, and school-based assessment accounts for 60%. This is just but one of the many reasons. The policy on progression is also implemented by schools, but we cannot discount the impact of COVID-19 in terms of learning losses, as the minister correctly pointed out. The National Education Collaboration Trust has worked with the sector to develop a plan to deal with issues that are related to the recovery of the education sector. The last but one issue, Minister, that I thought I must take this opportunity to address as well, is that the matric results this year will be released differently. Mr. Motshekga has already communicated with all media houses, and this has been occasioned by the promulgation of the POPIA Act, the act that deals with providing personal information, which dictates on the department to follow certain procedures which we are not able to follow now, such as getting the consent of learners and guardians before you share personal information of such learners. So we have written to all media houses about this, and I thought it's important that we also communicate this to you. The last point, Minister, is about storm-damaged schools, particularly over the school holiday period from December and a bit of January, we have had many schools that got damaged through inclement weather. And we're still collating that information. I've received only this morning before this meeting from Gauteng, and they were indicating that they've got about 57 schools, which is an increase from what they had last year, either vandalized or schools that might require urgent attention before they are utilized by learners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, Ms. Geya and DG. Colleagues, we've come to the question time, and we will now request those that have questions to please indicate by raising your hand, and then you introduce yourself so that we can do this in an orderly way. I'm seeing one hand. Okay, there's two now. Tagalani, do we have questions via SMS? Oh, sorry, WhatsApp. I'm behind time. I'm still in 1999. All right, let me start here in the front.
My name is Gabriel Sopoto from Higher FM. Just one question regarding the ruling, I guess, by the Competition Tribunal last year in November that really allowed parents to get their school uniforms from any supplier. What have the conversations been since then in terms of parents getting their children's school uniforms, and how is the department ensuring that suppliers are not overcharging parents?
All right, thank you for that. Question 2. All right, thank you for that. Was there a third one? Okay. Yeah, I can't see you there at the back, but ngizocela uzintroduce sizokhuluma. All right, we've got that one. Is rotational timetabling continuing, and for whom exactly? All right, let's deal now with the questions on the WhatsApp line. Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Mtanga. The questions that we have a couple of questions on the WhatsApp platform. And our first questions are coming from Suman Naidu, who is a freelance journalist. And the first question is, as the children going back to school, has the department made arrangements with the Department of Health to offer the COVID-19 vaccine to children at school? And the follow-up question is regarding the issues of COVID-19, which the question is, will screening measures continue to be followed strictly? As we know, many public places have eased these measures amid the Omicron variant. And the third question, as we await the matric results, is the department confident the results will be announced on time, and has the Umalusi approved the exam? And there's a question with regards to sporting activities, and the question is in regards with sporting activities, including inter-school activities at schools. will this be allowed as children return to school? And the other one is with regards to metric results, which has already been addressed. Sometime it might continue or maybe pause. Yeah.
No, let's pause it right there. We'll come back for the second round. Minister, I'm going to ask you to lead in the responses, and yeah, I think the DG or the Deputy Minister will also come in if necessary.
No, thank you very much, Elijah. I was sharing with DG, he'll respond to the school uniform matter because personally I've not been. Okay. Okay. Now I was saying thank you for the questions, and DG will respond to Gatleb because after the ruling, personally I've not been following up on that matter. I know when the process was underway, we worked closely. I did address some of the forums that came around school uniforms and even the movement that we should cancel school uniforms. But in terms of monitoring now, the procurement, whether the prices have been moderated, I honestly would not be able to say if I'm aware that we have checked whether the prices were moderated or there was no overpricing. DG says he can answer that. The other question was around your metric results. Let me answer the rotational timetable. We did mention that until such time that we amend the regulations, things stand as they are. So we had encouraged schools that were able to accommodate learners with a reduced social distancing now of 1 meter to do that and make sure that we can bring back as many learners as possible. We had presented a submission last year where we also wanted the space to be reduced even to 0.5. So that's not even 1 meter, it's half of 1 meter that they allow us so that we can have social distancing, which we think could also help us to accommodate many learners. But we are also aware that there are schools that will still, in terms of the protocols as the department, not be able to bring learners. We have requested provinces to work on providing infrastructure to schools that technically were even overcrowded before COVID-19. There would have been a school where we were yesterday, where when there are bigger classes, you find that there are 70 learners in the class. If it's a language class, it's a maths lead, or some of the big subjects. To say provinces must first provide infrastructure to those schools, because even after COVID-19, we will still need those spaces. But in terms of our arithmetic or in terms of our maths, arithmetic tells that I'm not even in the grade category. I'm in the forms category, Form 1, Form 2. So in terms of our statistics, we allocate teachers in terms of learner numbers. So even if we extend the infrastructure, have more classes, we'll still be safe in terms of teacher supply. But the fact of the matter, with the current regulations, we will still not be able, in some schools, to bring more learners. We will need to work out with health, what do we do, whether they are relaxed in schools, if everybody, the majority, especially higher schools, because that's where we have a big problem. If most of our learners are vaccinated, at which level? As I say, with the teachers and staff, we think we're at the safe levels, because DG, the last time I checked with the department, we're at 80% of vaccination rates amongst our staff, our teacher and support staff. So we think we're at some safe level. Even those that had not vaccinated, I'm told they're now beginning to do it now that they can see that those who have vaccinated have not died, because they thought, I know some of them were saying you're taking chances, 6 months, we are dead, this thing is poison. At least they can see that we're not dead, so they're coming in numbers now to vaccinate. So the rotation until such time we announce remains as is. But schools in the meantime are encouraged to find more spaces to create situations to get more learners in, but still based on the existing protocols. We have not changed the protocols. Vaccinations, whether we're vaccinating schools, I did mention, maybe I didn't say it much more clearer. Vaccination still remains a health department's responsibility. We don't vaccinate in schools. So the matter of, we can work with the Department of Health the way we did with the teachers, to encourage teachers to have timetabling, to really make sure that we support the Department of Health. Up to now, even vaccination of young people, of children, is still a matter of the health department, the young people and their parents. There's no vaccination in schools. If there's vaccination in the school premises, it's us giving health space to vaccinate, but we are not necessarily involved in the vaccination. So there's no vaccination in health in schools. On the matric results, we still, if you recall why we have not published results before we reopen schools, and because of COVID delays, we had to delay the writing of exams with 2 weeks, so everything has been pushed backward. So we're at a stage where we're going backwards and forward with moderation, standardization, capturing of results, verifying. That's why we're confident that by next week we'll definitely be ready. So it's really a 2 weeks push that we had from the previous years, and we will be able, from the reports, Dr. Polya, that DG has been sharing with me, that we are on track. We should be able to publish results on the 20th. DM, I'm not sure, I left somewhere I've written matric results, anxiety and challenges. I'm no longer sure what the question was. So.
Are we sure that we're going to announce on the 20th?
Or we will. So DG, you can help.
Yeah, the issue of the school uniform, thank you, Minister. Mr. Motshekga also just confirmed that the memorandum of agreement or a protocol was signed between the Competition Commission and the Association of School Governing Bodies in March 2021. Now, the key question is to monitor whether there's going to be adherence or giving full expression to that signed protocol between the Competition Commission and the Association of School Governing Bodies. I've been part of the several fora where the Competition Commission came to present on that report. And I've also been part of the engagement because I'm chairing the National Consultative Forum, where school governing bodies and other bodies are sitting in the department and the sector. So the protocol has been signed. So that's the only thing that I was requested to address, Minister, but maybe the issue of screening. Screening is going to continue. The wearing of masks is going to continue. The overarching instrument that directs us on how to carry ourselves out in the public spaces is the COCTA regulations. And until the COCTA regulations are changed or amended, we will continue to adhere. Our directions are subordinate to the COCTA regulations. So all what the COCTA regulations direct or regulate that should be done, that will continue to do. Wearing of masks, social distancing, sanitize, and even screening regularly as we've been doing. Nothing is going to change. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Minister, I said you covered everything, but there was a question about sporting activities, if they are going to be allowed. Minister indicated in the speech itself that sporting activities, and she even said parents, both parents now will be allowed to accompany and watch their children when they participate in sporting activities. So that question was well covered by the minister. Thank you very much.
DM, even before you sit down, there are 2 more hands. So you might need to come back. All right. Let's start with the WhatsApp and exhaust that, and then we'll come to the hands. I've seen you. Okay?
We have a question from Dennis here from Network 24, and it's a follow-up question on the issues of Copia Act. And the question is, will there still be a gala event for top learners where their results will be made public, and if so, isn't that also against the Copia Act? And also, is the decision not negatively affecting learners, I mean, who are hoping for bursaries at higher education level? And we have a question from non-field from Health News, and the question is the Department of Basic Education considering making vaccines mandatory for educators and learners? And the last question from my side is from Aselindo from Capital Life Radio. And the question is, can we get an update on public or no fee paying schools closing doors for learners because the schools need some fee, normally 300 rand that they call a donation fee? And the follow-up question is this legal? If so, why not just say it's a school fee or registration fee? And if it's not legal or allowed, what can parents do in the situation like this? Since I must say there are questions that relates to the school vandalism and the vaccine and all other aspects that have already been covered on the speech and presentation. That's your thanks.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, I think you have the presentation and the speech there. Just share it with those colleagues so they can see that something had already been said about that. All right, let me start with Zikwana. We'll come to you, Motshekga. Yeah.
Sorry, the minister didn't answer any of the questions. It just depends on results and what will happen. What does the minister have to say about that? And then what's happening in Gauteng? Does the minister have to say this online registration system that is implemented in Gauteng? And I wasn't clear on my mother's question about the
Rotation.
the rotation. How's it actually going to work?
Okay. Can we just take the questions from Motshekga Minister so we can address all of them?
The next question is not DM, so I can answer mine.
All right, Motshekga?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to find out, I have spoken about the rotation of the same for the next 2 weeks as we're very consistent with engaging with the various departments to try and reduce those parameters 0.5 or something like that. Now what I wanted to find out is that when we check the timeline, August last year was the timeline that you had in the departments to reopen and hold that full time. We're in January, at the end of January we'll have February. I'm just curious to find out, do we have timelines as to when we can see a normal resumption of schooling for South African children, considering that some of their international counterparts have gone back to school? How long are South African children going to be at the receiving end of COVID-19? Yes, it's obviously the department is not created, but as concerned parents, when will South African children be back in the classroom full time? Thank you very much.
All right. Minister?
Yeah. On the administration and admission systems used in Gauteng, especially online. I know it has pros and other provinces want it, will wish to do it, but again, as you might also realize, it has some difficulties where parents either have no access to online system or they just don't use it. And it has created a number of problems. I mean, when I visited one flight by night school, I checked with the parents why they sent their kids there. They said we had not applied. Why did you not apply? I'm working. I didn't have time to apply. As a result, I didn't have a place. Therefore, I took my child to the nearest school. So it has its own difficulties. But administratively, it really helps the province to map out and deal with some of the old problems where there will be gatekeeping in certain schools. There will be when I was MEC, racial connotations to say in some formal middle C schools, if you come as, say, you're Motshekga, then school is full. Somebody who comes as somebody else, Nell, it's found out. So it was to deal, in a way, it has helped them deal with those gatekeeping problems. But it has its own challenges, especially for different parents. And maybe I was avoiding it because I also have a personal experience, a challenge with my nephew. The system of Gauteng took her, admitted her, the school refused, and the reasons they're giving, and we're still raising it, are just cultural. So she's staying with the other niece because the mother is not working. So the surnames are different. They think it's cheating the system because the surname here is Lomo, the other place is Ramorola. Therefore, they think the cousin is transporting a child to a place, whereas it's not true. She's already helping to look after her child and staying with her child. So there are all those difficulties that come with admissions. But to say I'm satisfied, I think that the province is getting it right. It still has its own challenges, which I hope will improve. So I can't say I am very unhappy with the system. I know it has challenges, but I'm also encouraged that we need to reach a stage where we can be very efficient in the way we deal with things and use technology to ease the way the way of business. So I see it as part of easing business through using technology. So it's a very encouraging process. Rotation, I did. Now I'm answering TM's question. We had said rotation will continue until now because we're opening tomorrow. We can't say schools now. So they have to go in, settle, and then start the negotiations. Last year, the negotiations that made it difficult for us to have all learners, especially in primary schools, going back. We couldn't get the concession of shifting from 1.5 to 0.5. We're only allowed a meter. So which threw off some of our plans in August. So we're not able to really get the full concession from the Coronavirus Control Council. So that's why we're unable to get all learners back by August. So we're able to only get about 80% of them. So with Omicron and high levels of vaccinations in schools, and I think the decision that the country has decided to live side by side with the virus. We're going back because we can't do it on, as DG said. Our regulations and our protocols are dependent on the protocols and the regulations of COCTA. So we have to go back to them to say the country has decided to live side by side with the virus, strengthening all the other preventative hand washing, which we think we have mastered in our system. We are appealing again to get COCTA to allow us to reduce from a meter, because now we're still stuck with a meter, to a 0.5. And that's the new matter around the social distance and returning learners back to class. But we can't just announce to say tomorrow every child footstood school do. We have to process it properly, and that's what is the issue from August, even now from February. So it's a process that we have to negotiate on whether 200 rand is school fees or donation. I think parents have the right, when they are gathered, to decide amongst themselves to say, we will want to have a soccer field, can we all contribute? And if they are agreeing, there's nothing wrong with donating to your child's well-being. I've been to a number of schools where lots of changes and improvements have been done by parents from their own fundraising, from their own contributions. And parents, when parents volunteer and say, yes, we are poor, we don't have the money, but as parents, we're agreeing that in our poverty, we can contribute 300 rands per family, and it's a decision of the parents. And I think other parents were represented by those parents in terms of how things work. If they can afford, they're obliged to do it, but it's not school fees, it remains donation. Meaning that children whose parents cannot pay that 300 rands may not be victimized if they are not paying. Okay. The parents used to travel all the way from Hammanskraal to my office when I was in Gauteng to say they've been made to pay 50 rands, and then I asked them, how much did you spend to come here? And say 100 rand. Why share 50 rands? So when parents decide to donate, let's encourage them. But if they can't, their children can't be victimized. But we are encouraging fundraising, donations, all sorts of things that we do in all our other activities. We fundraise in church, colleague, and do something that we really want to do to improve our situation. So that's my response to the donation. The donation remains donation and it's encouraged, but it's not compulsory.
Minister, I'm bringing my gadget so that we don't leave any question unanswered. To just add to what the Minister has said on Gauteng online registration, anything when you start it will always have teething problems. When Gauteng started on e-learning, all provinces were asked, when are you going to follow Gauteng? When are you going to follow Gauteng? Which means the e-learning that was initiated by Gauteng was not wrong. That's why even the media at the time saw it important for other provinces, even deep rural provinces, to follow suit. Same as the online registration. We are a learning country, and we need to adapt to be like all other countries. Parents have to learn. When coming to homeworks, now parents are mastering it, that they help the children because the in-year assessment help their children. So same as online registration. What I know, Minister, is that Gauteng has never not addressed all the issues of learners who have not been admitted in January. By end of February, all learners are in schools. Even last year, Gauteng and Western Cape, they had the same problem of learners who could not find space. But working with DBE and working with other stakeholders, they were able, these two provinces, and we all know the reasons why they encounter such challenges, because the country is moving to these two provinces. The country is moving to Gauteng, the country is moving to the Western Cape. So that's why they face these challenges. Let's help them, especially as the media, let's help them. Let's not make it to look very negative. Minister, on the gala dinner, that are we going to have the event, whether we call it gala dinner or event or just acknowledgement of the learners, it's about 27 learners. So the POPIA will still be followed. If all 27 learners said, no, we don't want to be invited, because it's not a matter that it will disclose, Minister will disclose their results, but it's a matter of them saying, well done, to form part of the top 30 learners of the country. But it's easy to get the consent from such a number. It's a very small number, And I believe that their parents also, maybe they are looking forward to that. Every learner would want to be seen as achieved better in the country, but we are going to respect whatever consent they are going to give. If it's negative, it will remain negative. On the vaccine, that is the Department of Basic Education going to make vaccine mandatory? Minister kept on saying in her speech that we rely on the Department of Health. We are not the custodian of vaccine or all the health protocols of COVID-19. It is the Department of Health and the NCCC. So when they agree that let it be mandatory, then the department will have no choice but to implement. Minister covered the donations. It's something that we get every year, that it's just that some principals, even myself, I remember standing here one day indicating that any agreement of parents, especially in no-fee paying schools, that they agree to contribute, whether it's 1 rand or 300 rand, as Minister indicated, that does not affect the child. That will not affect the child, that the child cannot receive his or her report because the parent could not. And when the school governing body reach that decision, they don't see it as the SGB and arrive at a decision of contributing money. They call the parent component, the parent of all the learners, in a parents' meeting to discuss. And when parents agree, and if there are parents who cannot, they indicate in that meeting that we are unable because we are not employed or because of any economic situation. That's why in most instances we do get information that these parents are exempted. But it may happen that a particular principal may become a bit stubborn, but when that matter gets reported, all MECs in the country, they are able to resolve and that child will go to school. It's not allowed. That's why we say even media get that information that a child was denied an opportunity to go to school because a parent did not pay whatever amount they agreed at a parents' meeting. Let that be reported and we'll make sure that that child will go to school. So, yeah, I've covered, the 500, Minister covered that. The timeline to see the full force, Minister covered that. That we depend solely on the Department of Health on all issues of COVID-19. We implement and we work with them, and thank you. DG, if there's anything that has not been covered, you can come and conclude.
I'm sorry that I have to adjust the mic all the time when I come up the podium, and when the minister and the DM come, then it's got to be lowered. Just to say, Deputy Minister, we have written to the information regulator, and the information regulator has responded to us. And they've clearly indicated what we need to do. In fact, our application in terms of certain provisions that we thought that we needed to fulfill, the regulator is of the view that we meet the requirements already, and in fact our application is not necessary. But you have also adequately covered what the regulator has advised, that in cases we need to release personal information, what is the procedure that we need to follow? We need to get the consent of the learners in question as well as their parents. So as the Deputy Minister indicated, what we usually do, we invite them together with their parents, and then they'll indicate their objection in that regard. Just one point with respect to what the Minister has adequately covered already. Sizikona Chona. Gauteng has shared with us their report this morning. They've managed to place 86% of the learners who needed placement, Minister. They are still in the process of placing the 14%. And they've also indicated that of the 14%, 18% of those learners are actually learners coming from outside the country that they have to deal with. But the head of the department has indicated that they met yesterday and these numbers could change. And this is the report that was discussed yesterday. And they could change from the placement that would be happening today. And part of the problem has to do with the preference of parents, Minister. Preference of parents. Understandably so, every parent would like to get his or her child to a best school. And our challenge and our responsibility is to make sure that all our schools are able to meet the expectations and the requirements of our parents. The information that I shared with you earlier on, I hope it has gone a long way in demonstrating the confidence that the public has on public education, where the numbers of enrollment continue to grow. And I want to urge you to compare it with the growth even in the independent or the private sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, DM, and thank you, DJ. I think we've come to the end of the briefing. I'm not seeing any more hands, but even if there were, we are still here, but we need to conclude the briefing and go do other things. There's a lot of work as we commence with school year 2022. Thank you so much. We'll meet again soon.